and I think science it's just so annoying sometimes because science is supposed to be this is the truth, right? Because we've studied it, we've tested it. This is the reality of the situation. There's no other possibility, right? But I feel like it's the opposite. I feel like it expands possibilities to the point to where I can't compute. Like like I'm like always thinking like people will talk about like I've seen so many different opinions about the same damn topic and it's like why do you have if you guys are both scientists, you both studied everything, you both tested it and you came up with two different outcomes.
Mm.
Why is that annoying to me? It's like because I don't know how to live life then. Because I like doing things right, but
Yeah.
like if you don't know what is right, or if one person says I can't just make that decision and then be like, and then find out later that it's not right. Like I just want to make the right decisions everywhere I go. So like you hear about things like different populations in the earth that weren't exposed to the outside population, um, that ate so much of a specific fruit that their lives expanded because of whatever was in that nut or fruit or whatever. And but then when we came or they saw them, a different group met with this tribal group. They started dying off because of all the diseases that was brought and everything else. So it's like obviously a lot of people had built up immunity to the disease, but they hadn't because they were isolated. But they lived for like 100 and something years. Like it was
Mm.
like 120 on average or something ridiculous like that. And then there's like the whole like I guess I don't understand sometimes why something isn't widely accepted. So there's these things called hyperbaric chambers. They essentially give you a higher level to oxygen, and a lot of people say that through that you have a faster healing process. You like if you're exposed to a lot more oxygen when you're like growing up, then you can like grow larger in a way, like
Hmm.
it because of the way that oxygen works in your body.
Yeah.
But like and we have like oxygen tanks and everything. But it's just weird to me because it's like for instance, sports athletes they in order to recover, some of them will do hyperbaric chambers. So it's
Hmm.
just like I'm wondering like why isn't like not widely accepted to I guess that's a thing. Like it just seems like it's a small niche of people that believe that. But it seems to be from everything that I've seen to be like, oh, that's like pretty true or that's like so I always have a hard time with science because it's like I like it and I like the study of things and I like testing things, but ultimately what is right? If even after all this time we can't even decide on a similar answer.
Yeah. Yeah. You leave your hands. You leave your hands. You leave your life in the hands of these people that are being relied upon to tell you what's real. And if you can't even trust that, it's like, what is it?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder, like, how half-assed can a scientist take his job? You know what I mean? And then just like, yeah, you know what? This is probably what's going on here. And then like that's written into scripture, and then like the next person who's testing is testing their stuff.
Based off the old assumption. And
And
that's how science is.
yeah,
They all base it off old assumptions. And it's like,
yeah.
that's the only way you can. And same with math. It's kind of like the only way that you can move forward in like growth is like by assuming that certain things are right. But it's
Mm,
also leaves the most room for error
yeah. Cause
because you make assumptions and they're not true.
yeah. Mhm. 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 Mhm.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, and then also like depending on how the scientist is being paid, they're sometimes highly motivated to find something
Mhm.
that is somehow miraculously shows up on the day or two before their funding ends. And
Right.
it's like, is this really like, did you find this because you thought this was like, if this is actually the truth? And because obviously you have to like, you have to give the benefit of the doubt in some
Mhm.
cases, but you can't do it for all of them. Like, how many of them are just doing it because they're getting paid to keep finding something.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, that's a like how do you enforce morals in that field? Because like you said, and I find it really easy to make sense of imagining that someone's entire work ethic is dictated off of how they're receiving money and where that money's coming from and stuff like that. Like there's always been conspiracies about like the FDA and all the stuff that they approve and all this
Yeah.
stuff, or
Oh yeah.
what they release as healthy or unhealthy
Mhm.
is often correlated with how the economy is working in that area of like
Big pharma, you know.
yeah, big pharma is a big one. I think I've heard people talk about how the sugar market and like low fat diet products and stuff trying to tell you that oh this thing is better for you than this thing when
Mhm.
actually it's the opposite, but they needed more economic flow
Mhm. Because
I
because
forget
they
what the
have, well, it's like essentially like they're connected in some way, shape, or form to someone who has an interest. So just like politics, someone has an interest group,
mhm
and they're essentially paying that person to tell people that, or like
mhm
to insinuate that this is the right way to go. Like, and that's one of the things that bugs me the most is diets. It's like I've researched it a lot, and everyone has a different point of view on what's
mhm
healthy, and it's like, and then you have to think about like the individual body, and like
mhm
everybody has different, digestive stuff, and like, but ultimately there is some general things that you can like carry over, and but it's just so complicated.
yeah
Why is it so complicated? I don't know. But like it's just you have to, if the world was completely moral, then we wouldn't have to worry about it so much. But this reminds me of, and this is kind of like, I mean, actually, it's really like geeky. Um, so there's an anime that I've watched, and it's called Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and there is this thing called alchemy, and it's the law of equivalent exchange. Essentially, whatever you want to create, you need to have the equal parts to essentially transfer into something else. Like it
mhm
needs, you can't just create mass out of nothing. It has to
mhm
be. And so it's a form of magic, but it's like somewhat like a hard magic system where it's like you have this set laws and rules that you can do. You can There's always things that they're learning about it, discovering new things, ways to use it in different ways. Like it's kind of like a science as much as it is a magic. And
mhm
um, there's this one guy who you become a state alchemist, and they essentially give you money to research or to do the government's will, essentially. So there's this one guy who's created this thing called like a chimera. So a chimera is essentially, in a lot of other, TV shows, movies, video games, a chimera is kind of like a blend of two creatures. Um, and but in this one, I think it was kind of interpreted as a a being that shouldn't have like cognitive thought, but does. Like for instance, kind of like a dog who can talk in a way, or like a um something that, yeah, you can look at and you're like, okay, that's an animal, but then it can has some form of understanding and knowledge, and can maybe even communicate. So this guy, he had gotten into the state alchemy program by creating a chimera, and so I don't remember what happened, but the state certification expires after 8 years or something, and if you don't do anything of worth, then you get booted essentially.
mm
So like you find out then this guy's going to be in a really bad financial situation in the show, and like he's like, I'm working really hard to try to find this, like I'm trying really hard, really hard, really hard, and then like you're sad for him, you like feel really bad, he's a really seems like a really good guy, and then you
mhm
find out like they go to his house later, and it's like, oh, I created another chimera, and it's like a dog, like a bigger dog, and it kind of talks, and like it says like a few words, but like he did it so he could renew his state alchemy thing, and you find out that he morphed the the family dog and his daughter into one being,
Oh,
and that's the only way that he could make the essentially the dog talk or whatever
right.
is by doing
Oh,
that. So he
jeez.
literally sacrificed, and you find out the first one that he did was his wife.
Wow.
So it's like you, it to me it's obviously like just like a creative exercise in the show. Like it could be representing something in real life, but I just think I honestly thought, I'm like, you know what, like that's actually like a really good point. Like you don't know to what extent people will go to assure themselves to be secure or getting paid or whatever. Like you don't
Yeah.
know, people do some shady stuff for money. Like I mean, we see it all the time. So
Yeah. Our history's full of it.
yeah, I don't know, man. It's super trippy to me because you think like, oh yeah, people are good, like people are going to do the right thing, like that you want to believe that, but ultimately like you see more of the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
People making the wrong, maybe, like I don't know, they just make bad decisions because they are either selfish in a situation
Mm-hmm.
or they don't care or they're lazy or there's so many reasons, but I it just kind of brings like your general idea of humanity like lower and lower
Mm-hmm.
as it continues, because now that we have more information in the technological era, we know a lot more evil that's happening than what maybe we would know if we were like peasants living in, I don't know, some other society.
Right. There's much more access to information to know what's going on and stuff.
Mm.
I think yeah, you can't rely on humanity to do the right thing, especially in a workplace environment.
Hmm.
Like the examples we're talking about with like hypothetical like scientists and stuff, like taking shortcuts and all that. Um, but it's like, you know what? I see that. I see that pretty much anywhere I've ever worked. Just people trying to, make things easier while sacrificing like quality of work or something like
Hmm.
that. It's like that's that's like a part of being a human. Like it doesn't always translate like when you leave the workplace, but when you're just there because someone else is taking care of your livelihood, you're
Yeah,
you're like, whatever, screw this job or whatnot. It's like how far up the hierarchy of jobs does that go? Like is that just,
the base
the
level.
yeah, or like as you climb up the ranks or go to uh, a certain level of public figure and all this stuff, you absorb more responsibility about stuff. Like how much of that laziness is carried over, you know?
I think I
Well,
think it completely. I think it it's completely carried. Like I think that people can change. I do believe that. But to me, like I worked at Target for a while, and I feel like I have the same work ethic there or like at my current job, and so it's like I was slicing meat and throwing stuff in the fryer, like it was like simple things, and I still kind of like took it seriously, and so like I think that you would see someone like I would I would trust someone depending on their work ethic more than I would depend on them for their knowledge even. Like
mm,
I would depend on their character and their like I would trust them more to do kind of like the job that you expect of them. Like if
mm-hmm,
I was an employer, I would hire someone not based off like you look at their resume and you see all the like, oh, did this school and they had this many years of experience. Like no, like I care maybe about that a little bit, but I would care way more about if I teach you this, how are you going to treat it? Or if like,
mm,
what do you care about as like a person to where you would be like a good employee in this situation? Because, you could see someone who has like a bunch of responsibility, but they're just like either a terrible person morally and usually once they get higher up, like you're not too lazy because most of those lazy people wouldn't get it, but depending on their connections and like there are people that happens to, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is a truth to after a certain threshold of climbing up social status in your job or whatever, that you have to have some sense of work ethic. Otherwise, you won't float for very long. You'll
Hmm.
you'll sink all the way back down to the bottom or something. So I think yeah, after you reach a certain threshold, you are required to have a certain work ethic in order to survive.
Mm.
But now is work ethic and character and moral value the same thing? You know?
Not completely. Yeah, I think there's crossover, but
Mm-hmm.
like I just remember there was one guy that I worked with at Target that he was like my favorite person there. Like I just loved being around him, spending time with him. We always had a great time, laugh.
Mm-hmm.
But I hated working with him. Like I I could not stand it. Like it was like I would I felt like I was like having to like push him in every scenario because he would just be like slacking because he didn't care about the job and not to say that he would and I think that's actually a big thing is caring like depending on how much you care for your job, I think also dictates the outcome. So like work ethic is important in any job that you do, but I think you it's more natural if it's something that you maybe enjoy or are really passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or what is just more natural to you're kind of the person that you are. Like a lot of people are more social, so like I wouldn't recommend them being like a desk job, but like something that has to do with them communicating and maybe driving somewhere and talking to someone, like a social worker, for
Yeah.
instance. Like they
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of stuff, and so I think that there's certain personality types that also go better in jobs, and maybe that you would attribute work ethic in a way to effectiveness and like that effectiveness can kind of like change or like for instance if you have more passion I think you have more work ethic towards what you want to accomplish more than what you feel like you have to
Yeah.
but then there are those people that are like I have to do this and so they do it like and that kind of goes into what we were talking about way before and we're about like the mental toughness or like you just go into so many like this is the right thing. I have to do this even if I don't want to.
Yeah.
Whereas, it I think it's more ideal for everyone if everyone's in something that they just love to do. I just don't think that's reality. So,
Yeah. Yeah. You'd have to fight your whole life to do something that you love unless you're being sponsored to get there, I think.
yeah.
But either way. Either way.
Yeah.